Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing.
here on time. I'm just going to wait for a couple more minutes to see whether some people turn up. First up on the agenda is the election of a chair and co-chair. Good morning, everyone. My name's Adam Gosling from the APRICOT Secretariat. According to the SIG guidelines, the first item on the agenda needs to be a chair and co-chair election. So I'll run that before handing over to the newly elected chair. As you can see on the screen, we've had a nominee for the chair position, Masato Yamanishi. Unfortunately, no nominee for the co-chair position, although we did have some expression of interest, but someone who couldn't make it to this meeting. And so unfortunately, the SIG guidelines require them to be in the room to participate in the election. So unfortunately, we weren't able to include that nominee. So my plan is to announce Masato Yamanishi as elected chair unopposed and invite him to the floor, but if we could just confirm his election with a round of applause, please.
Hi everyone, good morning. I'm Masato Yamanishi, and thank you very much for choosing chair me again. But unfortunately, as I mentioned, we don't have any nominee for co-chair position, so I should run this meeting only by myself. And SIG guideline says co-chair will support chair, and also if something happened for chair, take over chair's role. Like if I don't know, I attend future meeting or something happened for me, co-chair will take over my role. That's the yeah. So I wanna make sure two things about co-chair. First one is that I would like to have another co-chair election in next meeting. And also, second suggestion is if something happened for me, I would like to ask the secretariat will choose acting chair from current NRONC. Is it acceptable things? If you have any other suggestion or against for my idea, please raise your hand and mention that. So can I assume these two things are accepted from the community? Okay. So let's go to regular items. So first one is the SIG administration slide. And this is a charter of policy SIG. Develop policies and procedures which relate to the management and use of internet address resources by APRICOT, NIRs, and ISPs within the AP region. Then today we have 3 sessions. In the first session, this one, we will, after we'll present about reporting network abuse and APRICOT's database accuracy. And second presentation will be presented by Jeff Houston about addressing and routing in 2014. And third item is Prop 115, which proposed registration of detailed assignment information in whose database by Luli, by Hiromi and Tomohiro. And second, we will continue second session, and we will discuss 2 proposals in second session. First one is a Prop 113, which proposes modification in the IPv4 eligibility criteria. And second one will be Prop 15, which proposes modification in the ASN eligibility criteria. And after the lunch, we will have third and last session. And in that session, we will have 3 items. Yeah, 3 items. First one is our APNIC IPv6 tools and delegation practice, which is informal presentation by Ganlian. And second one will be Prop 115, which propose on-demand expansion of IPv6 address allocation size in legacy IPv6 space by Tomohiro. Then last one will be that's informal presentation from Andrea from LibNCC, which he will share current status of inter-RIL transfers in Live region. Then we didn't reach consensus for any proposal in last meeting. So right now we don't have any open action items. Then yeah, in here it is a good chance to introduce. Of course, I'm chair, and also we have 3 NL and C. But I cannot see after. After is, I think he's in lightning talk session right now, and but he's a presentator, not. Okay. Okay. Anyway, let's go. Dr. Ejikmal. Yeah, he's our. He was elected NL and C in last meeting. Can you stand up and? Okay, then third person is Tomohiro. He's serving NC quite a long time, so I think everybody knows him. Okay. Then this slide shows each steps in PDP, and currently we are in here. Oh, sorry. We are in here, policy 6 session. Discussing and asking consensus in policy 6 session. Then tomorrow we will have AMM or AGM. Then in the AMM we will ask consensus again to, especially for APNIC members. Okay. Then if the proposal will be reached consensus in these processes, it goes to comment period to confirm consensus. Normally, it will be 4 weeks, but chairs can extend to 8 weeks as maximum. Then after that, it goes to EC endorsement, then editorial comment period, then go to implementation. That's the PDP process. And I'd like to make sure the definition, description about consensus. Consensus means a general agreement taking into consideration comments on the mailing list and also at the meeting. Then, even though I will ask consensus by showing your hands, but it is a way of broadly gouging opinion. So even though there are some opposed, the proposal may lead to consensus. Vice versa is also true. Then comments, since PDP is open to public, comments via remote participants are also welcome. Then remember, minor objection will be some minor objections means some problems may occur for some members of the group. And major objections means major problems will occur for parts of the community. So it has more severe implications for more people than minor objections. Okay, and participants should work together to resolve. Sometimes discussion will be very excited and accused to opponent, but please remember that the goal of PDP is reached to find something which everybody can agree. Okay. Then this is a difference, but let me skip it. Then confer. We have some updates from from previous version. And so, can you explain details of this part? Oh, actually, I don't have any co-chair, so I need to ask many things to Adam in this meeting.
Thank you very much, Masato. Before I begin, I've just been informed that I owe Dr. Kumar an apology. In preparing the slides, I've spelled his name wrong. It should be A-J-A-Y, not A-J-A-I. So sorry about that, Doctor. Someone certainly did. So I've been informed, and I'll correct that when it's slide pack when it's loaded to the website. So for those of you who were in... it's misspelled on the transcript. For those of you who were in Brisbane, we had a bit of a play around with a new interactive tool that we're proposing to use to gauge the level of consensus among the community. And the advantage of what we call Confer, for consensus feedback in real time, the advantage is that you don't need to be in the room. So we're trying to make it possible for the broader community to engage online using the webcast and remote facilities. So we had a play with it, and it worked pretty well, but there was some things that we thought we could maybe improve. So the software team at APRICOT have done a little bit of work on it, and I just want to run through those and give you a brief introduction to how to use the tool, because we want to have another test of it today. So the graph now displays the number of participants, the names of the people logged into the system is displayed to the admin, and I'll show you that, but it doesn't show you what their submission, what their opinion is, for privacy reasons. And there was something that was discussed whether we should do that or not, so we've taken the safe option there. There's now a way to stop it because it was jumping around a lot. As you can see, we removed the jitter. And so now the chair can either set a timer or can say, I'm going to close it now. You can now withdraw your selection. So if you say you strongly support, then you're starting to think, I'm not sure. You can change it to neutral, or you can click strongly support again and it will just be a nil submission. So it's like abstaining, I guess. The chat screen was a bit messy with people joining and leaving messages, so we removed that. And we've implemented Google Capture as a temporary measure. When we get the APNIC single sign-on, that will be implemented instead. And that should possibly, I think, hopefully, before the next meeting. And another feature is that it now kind of doesn't work so well on mobile. I've tried it on iOS. One person I noticed had success with it on iOS this morning. If there are Android users in the room, I'd invite you to give it a go so we can find out. But unfortunately, I can't guarantee that that'll work, so sorry about that. I just want to give you a quick kind of rundown. This is the admin screen, and as you can see, there are proposals on the left, a graph with the results. This is kind of zoomed into a demo proposal, and you can see there's a list of participants there, and it says who's kind of logged in and has it in their browser at the moment, and whether they've submitted an opinion on the question. This is switching to the kind of user side. If you go to confer.apnic.net, you'll be an opportunity to log in or register. If you register, you'll get this on part of your screen, this apparently, I'm assured, does say I am not a robot. The point I guess I'm making here is that your experience here in this registration will depend on your browser. It's a Google system. It works one way in Chrome and it works another way in Firefox. This is a screen grab out of Safari, which just assumed that I was Japanese. Once you've logged in, and please be patient, first up you'll get a message that says there is nothing under consideration at the moment. Just be patient. It's taking a little bit of time to load. We found that Masato and I had a play with this yesterday lunchtime, and well, there were some issues. It was misbehaving a little bit. We suspect it might be the number of hops back to Brisbane, because this is hosted back in Brisbane. I think in future we may bring it with us and host it locally. So please, if it's not doing what you expect it to do, just give it a little bit of time. And sometimes you have to give it a little bit more time than you think, because it doesn't appear to be loading. The little wheel is not spinning or whatever, but it is actually working away in the background there. Just quickly, you'll find the name of the question, the name of the proposal or the question up in this area. That's the countdown timer. You can join the chat by writing in there. And those are the submission buttons, which I say you can change as often as you like till the timer runs down or the chair closes, or you can click the same one again and have no submission. Just zooming in on that last screen, there's something I want to point out here. When a question is ended, this line will appear which says, this question's closed. If you want to consider the next proposal or the next question, please click here. So it's kind of like refreshing to get the new question. And that's all, thanks. So look, the idea is that we want to at least try it for the first session and see how it goes, just as a real world user test, and we can identify any bugs or any other issues. If it's not working so well, I think regardless of whether it's working well or not, I think Masato plans to still do the traditional show of hands as a double check to compare the results. And if it's not working at all, we will just kind of quickly abandon it if that's okay. That's all I've got. Thank you very much. I'll hand back to Masato.
Thank you, Adam. As Adam explained, we are adding more features to Confer, and also it's first time to use Confer remotely. So I'd like to use both ways. I mean, showing by hand and also Confer in each proposal. And first proposal will be plot 115. Which is the last item in this session. So I'd like to suggest you register yourself to Confer as soon as possible, because we will use it within 1 hour, okay? So let's go to next item on agenda. Next one is actually informal presentation from after, but still I cannot see him in here. So let me ask Jeff Houston to present his proposal. And the reason why we ask this presentation is actually many policy discussion should be based on current statistics number about our number resource. So Jeff will explain about that.
Thanks, Masato-san. I'm Jeff Houston. I'm with APRICOT. We've been doing address policy for more than 20-odd years, yes? And an essential part of any policy process is to understand whether it worked or not. And when we look at this, one of the major sort of metrics of whether a policy of allocation addresses actually is working or not is to look at how addresses are used in the network where you allocated them. Within the RIRs, we have this general principle of conservatism in the use of addresses. Certainly with V4, we've understood for many, many years that it's finite. But not only that, we understand that the routing system where the addresses will be announced and used equally has some finite limitations. You can't just take an address block, slice it in V4 into /32s and expect the world to listen to you. It won't. But equally, you can't take a block, say a /16, and slice it into /24s and think that that's a nice thing to do, because the current storm of more prefixes loads up everybody's router. So we make policies around making sure that we hand out address prefixes that correspond to CIDR blocks. We try and make sure that you, as operators, don't, if you will, play havoc in the routing system because the allocation policies caused you to do so. So it's useful to understand what the effect of the policies we've made is on the routing system. In other words, how are we working? The other part of this is, of course, conservatism. We don't want to hand out all the addresses at once. We want to be deliberately as fair as we can to both folk now and folk in the near-term future. So the other part of this is looking at how addresses are going from a sort of a larger perspective. So I'll start with addresses and very quickly look at what's been happening over the last few months. As you well know, the predictions of V4 address base are now older than APRICOT. We knew by about 1990 that we were going to run out. As you're perfectly aware, APRICOT is now on this last /8 policy where the maximum allocation to any new entrant, in fact any entrant, is now 1,000 addresses. Similarly, RIPE has had a similar policy and is now in its last /8 policy. RIPE's and APRICOT's allocation practices actually mean at this point that both registries have between 7 and 8, maybe 10 years to go on the existing allocations out of that last /8 block, which means that folk who come along to the registry and are surprised there's no more addresses, what, you mean you've run out? Yes, years ago, can still get a small block of addresses, which still, in theory, would fuel a moderately large NAT. 1,000 addresses will certainly, if you push things hard, service 10, 20, 30, 100,000 if you're lucky, customers if you really push hard at the boundaries. LACNIC exhausted its address pool in May. LACNIC did not have a last /8 policy. They had a reserved /10, which they reached in May. The policies of access to that are a little bit tougher. It's not a general purpose. You can get a tiny bit. As I recall, the LACNIC policies were actually about you had to demonstrate its use in a V6 transition context. And so the consequent consumption of LACNIC, which is that little bit there, is actually quite small. ARIN is the big one. Today, as we speak, ARIN has around 1/3 of a /8 left. They have no last /8 policy. They have reserved a /10, as I recall, but someone will correct me if I'm wrong. But importantly, that /10 is already reserved. So it's not here in this diagram. In this diagram, that line there will hit that bottom line there, i.e. 0. ARIN will bounce off the bottom. Currently, because this slide was prepared some time ago, currently ARIN will bounce off the bottom. When did I say? May? I think I've drawn it in a slight bit. It's sort of early May, but you know, if you're that desperate you're counting on the day, life is hell, you know, you've already broken things, don't worry. And about the only registry that still has heaps and heaps and heaps of addresses is still APRICOT, which its consumption rate is relatively conservative, and it has, I think as you can see there, around 3 /8s left. So that's the general picture on exhaustion. We expect ARIN to run out in the coming weeks, and at that point they move into a last /10 policy, which, as I recall, and I'm looking for nods, is about V6 transition. You can't just be anybody. You have to have a plan about how you're going to use this in the context of a transition. Lots of nods. I've got that kind of right. So this is kind of an overview of the last, gee, I need glasses now. Getting old. I'm getting as old as this slide, which dates from 2005. It is kind of interesting because the last full year we allocated 250 million addresses. And that was only 3 years after the iPhone had hit the market. Last year, 1.5 billion iPhones were sold. Last year, we allocated 60 million addresses. Those 1.5 billion iPhones and Androids, Samsungs, and everything else really had to cram into a few tens of millions of addresses one way or another. The shortfall in the industry is dramatic. So where did they go? Who was actually getting addresses? Since 2010, you can actually see which countries have been receiving addresses. Certainly in 2010, there was a lot of population times deployment. China, 45 million addresses, US 42 million. This is kind of mobility, really. Korea, 25 million, Japan, 10 million. In the wired world, they were saturated markets. But in the mobile world, they were deploying like crazy. And that's why the address pools came out. Most of those providers, I think the exception there comes with India, which is, I think, the first of them, that were using addresses in infrastructure as well as in mobiles, because there's just far more development across far more of the space. APRICOT ran out in 2011. The sort of pace of allocations in APRICOT up to the exhaustion point in April was dramatic. China, 53 million addresses, Japan, 17 million, Korea, 7 million, Indonesia, 7 million. You see that the APRICOT countries were kind of featuring high in the top 10. The next year, RIPE NCC. RIPE did not have quite that sort of last-minute panic, but certainly China disappears because there's just no more addresses from APRICOT, and the total gets lower, and countries like Canada and Brazil come up. Again, Canada and Brazil, largely mobiles. RIPE ran out in 2012, and now we see South America, Colombia, Argentina, Brazil come up, and interestingly, million allocations, such as in Nigeria and Seychelles. The Seychelles one is about the one that's very interesting. That's a cloud provider, and it's not really the Seychelles. As I recall from the case that was made on the public lists, this was something about a more regional effort and may have even been larger than Africa, but beyond that I really don't know. LACNIC ran out in May this year. You can see that there was a certain amount of rushing at the bank. Brazil, 10 million addresses, Colombia, 2 million. But now, of course, we're seeing the last remaining RIR with addresses being APRICOT, so Morocco, Egypt, South Africa, Kenya now figure in this list. So that's kind of where the addresses actually went. There is a considerable demand for V4 addresses. It's absolutely undeniable. And certainly most folk are using carrier-grade NATs. Again, absolutely undeniable. But also what's going on is a large amount of address transfers. A lot of these are sales that appear in the registry, but some of them seem to be what I'd call leases, where the registry details and the address holder details are not the same. So here are the number of transferred addresses in terms of the number each year in that top table. So in 2014, there were a total of 1,300 address transfers. So having a transfer policy was a damn good idea, everyone. You know, folk are using it because they need to use it. And certainly in 2014, with the last of the echoes of the old stockpile are now running out, and this onslaught of mobility is pressing really hard against the industry, we're now seeing more and more digging into those old unused addresses and more transfers. So 1,300 transactions. We didn't transfer billions of addresses. It's V4. There aren't that many billions. We transferred a fair deal though. 2012, 6.7 million addresses. 2013, 7.46. Last year it doubled. And some 16 million addresses, or the equivalent of a /8 across the entire system, actually moved between holders. So the registered address transfers about the equivalent of a /8, which is as you'd expect, I think, considering the folk who are now players in the market weren't players 20 years ago when the original legacy allocations were made. So we all publish address transfer registry lists, and if with a little bit of spade work, you can actually find out when they were first allocated. And so at the bottom is the number of years, how old are these addresses? I'm sort of sitting, right, now I can see. 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 25 years, and 30 years, as old as geology. And this is the percentage of addresses in each year. So when we go to the first year, which was 2012, 70% of the addresses were actually quite recent. The transfers were happening in recently allocated addresses, which is kind of interesting. 2013, only half the addresses were recent, and we started delving into the pools. Interestingly, last year, most of the addresses are between 2 and 9 years old, and 10% of the addresses that transferred are more than 15 years old, 6% are more than 20 years old. So what we're finding is the address transfer agents are actually getting a little bit more effective in mining deeply. That's what I see in the transfer registries. When I look at routing, as I'll come to in a little while, I get a subtly different picture. But let's park that thought and move to V6, because it's a V6 kind of world, isn't it? Absolutely. If you look at the number of address allocations per year, by and large, it's kind of zooming upwards, but since 2011, since exhaustion, it isn't. All of us had assumed that actually exhaustion would fuel the industry to think seriously about it. Those who were going to think seriously about it certainly did in 2010 and 2011, but the consequent uptake in the number of allocations has now dropped off. It's kind of those who were going to jump have jumped, the rest who are going to, I don't know what they're going to do, are doing what they're going to do, nothing. Volume of allocated addresses, always hard in V6 because big is so much bigger than small. And so a certain number of small allocations, such as in Arran in 2008, sort of dominates everything else. So that block there, as I recall, I think was Department of Defence, but I'm a bit vague. There was another big one inside APRICOT, I think that was into China. More recently, some of these allocations, and particularly large ones that are happening in APRICOT, the NIRC reported that 2 of them in China were actually about the Internet of Things. Sensors in highways, sensors in the environment. And I found sort of picking up on that report very interesting. Some countries are already moving in V6 in this sort of device sensor dense world and using V6 to actually support it. Here's the comparable chart of countries by addresses by year since 2010. So this is the volume of addresses in units of /32s. 2010, Germany was on the top of the list, not China. And United States and China were sort of ranked at 3 and 4. And in 2012, Argentina was at the top of the list. Relatively surprising lists in some sense because it's not what you would expect. In V4, China, UK, US and so on, the population and resource-intense countries were top of the list. But V6 was kind of different. 2014 is kind of more around expectation. United States, China, the UK, bit of a surprise. Visible amount of IPv6 activity in the UK is not startling. Maybe they're just preparing. Brazil, Germany, Netherlands, Russia. So that's where the addresses actually went. How are they used? What's the view from routing? We've run out of addresses, but we're growing by 45,000 new prefixes a year. That's really weird. I heard yesterday this wonderful proposal to use 2-byte AS numbers to do wonderfully glorious confederation-based routing policy. We've run out of 2-byte ASs. There are none left. We're chewing them up at 3,000 a year globally like a robot. And 4-byte ASs, you either use them or you haven't got an AS to use. That's actually really weird that consistency in AS number consumption has been there for many, many years. Predominantly Europe and America, AS consumption in this region is actually much lower. I suspect the reasons are regulatory, economic, and even social. That entrepreneurialism and this idea of sort of bringing up small businesses with heaps of small financial capital and then growing itself is more about a model of business that I think has deep roots in America and has spread to Europe. But around here, there's a certain amount of institutional construction of infrastructure rather than entrepreneurial construction. And I think that actually has an impact on AS numbers. The one graph that actually shows we really have run out of addresses is the amount of address space in the routing system, and that growth there actually reflects those last few allocations and also the recycling of addresses from transfers. So when dormant addresses appear in the routing system, I add them back in. But the obvious thing is, of course, that as we run out of addresses but we keep on adding more entries into the table, what's in a table gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So the average size of a routing advertisement today, /23. /23. It used to be more. At this trajectory, /24 within a year, then what are you going to do? Because at some point we're going to have to look at global transit of /25s if this trend continues. And there's so many /25 or smaller filters out there, I'm not sure how we're going to do this. But certainly that's one of these sort of warning points that we're getting close to, because that's the point where the current set of filters don't work anymore. That's the point of 256. So we will see. More specifics still take up half the routing table. And the other thing to note too, which is kind of interesting because it's actually really, really important. The average diameter of the internet has remained constant actually for 10 years. The AS distance from you to everyone else averages around 3.5 ASs. And you go, well, why can't it be 4? Why can't it be 5? Well, of course it can be higher, but the average distance across the network actually affects the performance of BGP to converge. And as long as the internet stays dense, routes will converge inside 70 seconds. And the average convergence time has been 70 seconds for about the last decade and a half. This is a distance vector protocol. It works by sending rumours. The further the rumours have to fly, and the more folks spreading false rumours as it flies, the longer it takes to converge. Right now, folk, when they get an AS, tend to cluster to the middle of the network, keeping the AS path relatively constant. BGP thanks you for doing that, because we all actually get really good performance. If you make the network stringier, we all suffer. I'll get back to that question that I asked before. Why are we growing 45,000 new routes a year when we haven't got any addresses? And the obvious answer is transfer policies are coming to the fore. And I showed you the age of transferred addresses year by year. I'm now going to show you a different graph. The age of addresses that appeared in the routing system year by year. The red is 2010, the green is 2011, 2012, 2014, the brown is 2014, the last year. Now, it's much the same kind of graph that as we get sort of more and more into exhaustion land, the amount of recent addresses is dropping. So the new addresses, we're reaching further and further back in time. But when I look at the transfer registry, less than 6% of the addresses that are actually registered as transferred in the registry system are more than 20 years old. In the routing system, 20% of the addresses that appear there are more than 20 years old. In other words, there's a large pool of addresses that have popped up in the routing system that in the registry system still have those original dates and still have those original holders and still have those original details. So there's this sort of appearing pool of addresses where the registry doesn't match routing in terms of who has that address and who's currently using that address. I regard that with some degree of concern, because if you can't trust a registry as who has addresses, I'm not sure what you trust, because that was the idea and the aim of why we have a registry in the first place. So I look at that with a considerable amount of concern and kind of wonder why we're seeing this kind of behaviour, that addresses are moving, but the registry is, for some reason, not being updated with the moved details. I just did a double click, but growth is slowing in the routing system. It's around 10% per year. It used to be far higher than that. I suspect that this whole issue of when V6 is going to happen causes investment to be uncertain. It becomes a high risk. And so we're doing lots of NATs, we're doing lots of everything, but at the same time that transition uncertainty is holding back a lot of folk. Because what protocol do I use? Can I do all V6? Well, you can't. What do I do about V4? Oh my God, transitional stuff? Well, which transition? There are 30 to pick from. We're making it very difficult for folk, and I suspect the market itself is saying, well, I'll go and build a new mine or whatever this year, I'll go and do the internet next year. The view of V6, the one thing I do notice is that World V6 Day was kind of funny. It sort of had this massive lead, you know, everyone said V6 is wonderful, but as soon as it happened, everyone went, oh, and took the next 6 months off. It's sort of weird. I'm not sure if the net result of World V6 Day was anything at all. It was sort of this bump, but the original trajectory is still kind of there. The routing indicators, 6,000 prefixes a day, not 50,000. AS numbers, 1,600 per year, not 3,000. Address consumption, It's not accelerating, it's pretty constant. Fascinatingly, the average size of V6 is getting smaller. 40%, I think it's 44% of the advertisements in V6 are a /48. 44%. I suspect that a 48 is the old 24. I suspect that a /49 doesn't go anywhere, but I know a /48 goes everywhere, and those folk who are filtering on /48s, you know, I don't like 48s, you're not seeing it all. And I suspect that out of our tortured discussions about the minimum routing size, the industry practice, without any particular visible consensus, but what I see out there in the actual routing system, is that /48s survive, /49s get filtered. And like it or not, that's what's happening. Whoops, I double-clicked again. It's enthusiastic. All the sins of V4 are being repeated in V6. It's not a clean aggregated space. Everyone is doing more specifics. I suspect that V6 will come of age when more specifics are 50% of the table, just like V4. And fascinatingly too, the diameter of the V6 network is 4 and that AS path length is constant. That's reassuring. What it says is, it's business as usual. If you're my upstream in 4, you're probably my upstream in 6. The relationships between players is being replicated in 6, and I find that a really encouraging indicator. Growth rate, well, it is encouraging. It's 20 to 40% per year, but that's not enough. At that rate, it'll take you between 16 to 17 years to get to parity. You don't want to take that long. It's not going to work like that. So just closing very quickly, are we all now using V6? No. Round about 3.5% of folk use V6, the others don't. The good news is that's double what it was a year ago, 1.8% to around 3.6%. Feel good about that. But if we double and double and double and double, which is really aggressive, that's about as good as this industry could possibly do, you can do it in 2019. That's the smiley side. If, however, you do 2% a year, I'm dead. I don't know about the rest of you, but by then I know I'm dead. It's not going to work like this. 2067 is untenable. So if you stick at 2% per year, forget it. Just don't bother. V6 is very uneven across the world, country by country. There's more in America, Germany, Norway, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Japan, and Peru. And in fact, this is weird. This is a list of countries against the world average. So the world average is round about there, and those folk are better than average, everyone else is worse. So if you're not listed, you're worst. Ecuador, better than average. Bosnia and Herzegovina, Singapore, Estonia, and of course Japan at around 10%, Switzerland, Norway, US, and so on. You can read as well as I can. That's actually a very small list of countries. Very small. And that's the folk who are better than average. What about Japan? This is the plot from Japan of the number of users of V6 since late 2011. And there's certainly been some very recent moves which are fantastic. So what we're seeing in Japan is around 1 in 10 folk are using V6. But it's not quite as simple as that. This is the list of, I think it's about the 25 largest ISPs in this country, ranked by size. So obviously, the largest ISP is OCN from NTT. The next highest is KDDI, SoftBank, Big Globe. If you've ever lived in this country, these are familiar names. Those are the names that sell the internet. So if you look at that top list, there are only 5 that are doing V6. NTT, no. KDDI, yes. Big Globe, yes. Tokai, yes. Jibu Telecommunications, yes. STN, that's getting pretty small, yes. Everyone else, no. That's typical all over the world. So what can we say about the world? This is the top 30 providers that do 6 and the estimated number of users that do V6. Comcast, 40 million customers, 17 million are 6 enabled. AT&T Internet 4, 44% of their customer base is enabled. That's 9 million. You can read as well as I can, but there's KDDI. Brilliant. 57% of its customer base. That's 7 million customers estimated running V6. But let me show you something else. That's the cumulative sum of all of the V6 users in the world. 30 ISPs are 86% of the entire V6 population. The other 49,970 ISPs account for a mere 14% of the V6 population. These guys are doing stuff, nobody else is. That's kind of interesting. So let me now flip this a little bit and say, well, why is this figure so low? Partially, this is because of a CPE problem. Some providers own and operate at the boundary, some don't. Some let the customers buy it. When the customers buy their own modems, equipment, etc., they never change it. And if it doesn't do V6, tough. That's a problem. Mobile providers should see a better story, but they don't. It's really, really hard to drag the mobile world up. Only when it's completely green fields and you've got so much money you don't care, and profit is something that someone else worries about, and your name is Google, can you get 87%? That's very rare to see, but it's an absolute greenfields rollout end to end that actually gets you those kind of numbers. So last but not least, I'll leave you with this thought. If V6 is going to be all over the world, then the top 30 ISPs on the planet will be doing V6, won't they? Because if they're not doing it, it's not worth doing. These are the top 30 largest ISPs on the planet. And this, against them, is the number of V6 users. And I've very subtly highlighted in rank 3, Comcast, rank 8, Deutsche Telekom, rank 10, AT&T, so few I can list them, TMNet in Malaysia, which in the last 6 months did something brilliant and turned on 1.5 million customers, KDDI in Japan, and Proxad, which is Iliad, which is free in France. The other 25, nothing. Nothing. So if you really want to understand, if you're one of the 25 who are listed there and you're not subtly highlighted as doing V6, you are the problem. And when we talk about addressing policies around V6, maybe we should look at the V6 allocations that those other 25 actually have. Are they missing? Can we do anything to spur those other 25 to actually do something? Because collectively, those 25 players account for approximately 40% of the world's users. If they all did V6, it would be brilliant. So just 6 of the top 30, those 30 largest serve 40% of the entire internet. Even if they got 50% penetration, we'd still have 20% of the world doing V6 rather than 3. And if that many of the largest ISPs are doing V6, everyone else has no choice. If that many of the largest ISPs aren't doing V6, then no one else will either. So I suspect we really, as we look at addressing policy with V6, need to look hard at who and how and why, if the outcome is trying to encourage this industry to make some productive investments. So hopefully that's given you a background as to the rationales of your policy, the overall objectives of what you're trying to do and address policy, and how that feeds back into the way the industry actually uses addresses and how it reacts to these policies. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Is there any comment or question? Okay, Katie, go ahead.
Kenny Huang, Executive Council member. First of all, thank you, Jeff Houston provides such very fruitful information. And I guess not everyone here has such profound knowledge as Jeff Houston did. So I will recommend next time probably that kind of information can provide it before the meeting, and because it takes time to digest and even take time to convert such technical information into a policy implication. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is it doable?
Sorry?
Presenting these kind of data before the meeting.
That's an excellent suggestion. I'm happy to implement it.
Okay,
I just sort of thought, oh yeah, I'll do it.
And also, I have one comment about average age of transport address. I think that one only shows sold address, right?
Yes.
Because if prefix is these, there is no update.
Well, the issue about leasing is actually very, very interesting, and that's certainly what I would like the policy folk to have a look at. If leasing is absolutely invisible to the registry system, then the fact that it has been leased and the visibility of that lease is occluded from general view. How do you know you're the only leaseholder of this one address? What's the public protections of this? How are we going to preserve uniqueness? Should we consider some way of accommodating leases within the structure of address registration and publication of registry? Because if we really are going to accept the fact that a large amount of the internet address space is going to be leased, not sold, maybe the registry should have some visibility of that, because I believe we would all benefit from a registry that accurately portrays who has which address today.
Yeah, that is my point.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay,
Oh.
after, go ahead.
After Siddiqui Sabinet. Jeff, I just need to know, just correct me if I'm wrong. You mentioned that we are adding 3,000 ASN per year,
Per year.
and you're not differentiating between the 2-byte and 4-byte ASNs. Do we have any update on that how many are 2-byte and 4-byte?
Oh, overall, and the numbers are on a laptop rather than in my head, the vast majority are 4-byte. And the reason why is the vast majority of source is actually inside Europe, and RIPE have ceased doing 2 bytes in any volume years ago. They hand out a lot of 4-byte ASs. I do have a report somewhere online, and if you send me some email, I will send you right at the report that shows you precisely which numbers are where. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. So next is our after informal presentation. After can come to the front, and after is there and is also serving as NLNC from last year.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Good morning. Seems like we are pretty awake. So, yeah, let's start with. So, the idea behind this presentation is like I've been doing a network abuse BOF for last 3 years, every APRICOT conferences.
Sorry, can I interrupt a little bit? Can I interrupt a little bit? Sorry, interrupting. I forget to ask one question. There is a discussion which time slot is good to policy SIG. Right now, we have second and third session on Thursday, but this time we need to add one more session. So, but lightning talk is going in parallel. So, at this moment, I would like to ask your affiliate or your daily job, whether it is a network operator or you're working for number resource. Okay, then I will ask same question again in the middle of the second session. Then I will compare that result. Okay, you understand my intention? So please raise your hand if you're working for network operator. Please raise your hand right now. Let me count in this time. 1,
From here?
2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, 6%. Then if you are working for number resource board, please raise your hand. Number resource board, and also you are working in AP region mainly, please raise your hand like that. Yeah, including NIR, also APNIC stuff. Okay, maybe roughly 33. Okay, then if your daily job is RIR or LIR in other regions, please raise your hand. No, I mean, I'm asking other region, not AP region. Maybe 10, okay. Okay, thank you very much. And sorry for interrupting after.
You were asking the right questions, so it's clear that many policy folks are here rather than the operators.
Yeah.
Because the operators are busy in the lightning talks right now. Anyway, so moving forward, before I jump into the lightning talks as soon as possible, as I was saying, like that we have been organizing the network abuse BOF for last 3 years in all the APRICOT and APNIC conferences. And this time we are not having that BOF, and I decided to present something that what we have been sharing for so long with very few people in the past. So this is something mentioned on the APNIC website, that what is the purpose of the WHOIS database. It is a public searchable database detailing address usage within the APNIC region. The result of any search are provided purely for operational purposes, such as finding the authoritative contact for a troublesome machine. So yeah, that is pretty straightforward. So the thing is, reporting network abuse, APNIC suggests that use the APNIC WHOIS database to obtain network contacts, and the definition is also mentioned on the website. How to do it? Contact network, admin C, tech C, and maintainer of the IRT object. Once you do the query of WHOIS database and the APNIC DB, you will get the information, again suggested by APNIC. So the issue is many operators like us, investigators, law enforcement agencies, end users and the institutions are using databases, WHOIS database to get the information, to report the security issues, abuse reports, either automated reports or manual reports, whatever they are doing. There are growing numbers of report I receive on daily basis on the admin C, tech C, or even on the IRT object as well. This is also encouraged by APNIC on their website on the FAQs. Oops, I'm not that enthusiastic, but why I double clicked, sorry. Yeah, so anyway, this is the text of a pretty old proposal shared with the community in the APNIC region. And the problem at that time was there are too many reasons for data inaccuracy in the WHOIS database. And the major 2 reasons mentioned here are still valid today. Wrong data is published to camouflage illegal actions, or wrong data is published because object owner forgot to update, or maybe moved, or company changes, blah, 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 so many other reasons can be. Currently, the only mechanism available is to report the invalid contact to the APNIC. If you find something which is not valid in the APNIC database, you just report it to the APNIC. APNIC notifies the member and requests them to update the record. Okay, what's the solution? I'm not sure if this is the solution. Aaron has been doing something for a couple of years, more than a couple of years now, that they have this policy which says that resource policy, it is mentioned the resource policy manual that makes sure that every point of contact has to validate their contact details every year. So this is the context of this policy mentioned here. Okay, back to the APNIC region. There are 4,342 IRT objects exist out of 4,714 members. 4,164 members created IRT object via MyAPNIC. So MyAPNIC is still very popular among the members in the APNIC region. And as per the Secretariat, I got the information yesterday that during 2014, that is last year, on an average, APNIC received around 100 invalid contact reports per month. I forgot to mention per month over here. So that's a lot of invalid contacts report they're getting. So as I suggested earlier, that there was a policy proposal in 2010, and the name of that proposal was Frequent WHOIS Information Update Request, as close to what ARIN is doing today. The author was the same who proposed the IRT object creation. The IRT object creation was accepted through consensus in our region and in many other regions as well. But somehow in August 2011, this proposal was withdrawn by the author because of lack of support from the community. So after discussing the same issue again and again and again within the community during the Network Abuse BOF, I'm presenting here in front of all of you to just figure it out if this is a problem or not before finding a solution. Because we have been demonized previously that we come up with a policy to solve a problem which doesn't even exist. So before suggesting any policy or before suggesting any guideline even, I would like to know if this is a problem or not. Are we comfortable with this invalid object reporting? It is happening like 100 per month right now. It can go up to 200 per month later on, but that is a manual process if I'm not mistaken. So somebody has to check that request, respond to the member who actually has that resource under their name, and then it takes time. So are we okay with that process? What to do with the contact reported as invalid? Okay, if something is invalid, the person who has the resource or the company who has the resource is not responding back, what to do with it now? We cannot take back the resources from them. And is the annual contact validation is a solution? What is happening in ARIN? Maybe somebody from ARIN can comment on that. Let's say we have to devise a policy. So how the process will work? And what will be the repercussion if I don't validate my account, validate my contact details? So because in ARIN, what they are doing is they simply mark it as invalid, which again, I don't think is a solution. So I just wanted to ask this question to the whole community. So this is the whole presentation. I would rather say it is a question to everyone if they can suggest something that how we should move forward. So yeah, thank you. And I would like to see a couple of questions or comments, something from the community.
Here, is there any comment or question about this presentation?
Hello, I'm Andrew Delahaye of the RIPE NCC. So we ran into similar questions a few years ago. And our main purpose is to keep up the quality of the registry, the accuracy of the registry. So we have been thinking about it, and we discussed it with our membership as well. And one of the things we have started to implement is we call it the assisted registry check. So our purpose is to touch upon our membership once every 3 years of all our members and do a review of their registry information to make sure that the registry information is up to date and accurate. So stuff we discuss with them is the registry consistency, billing addresses, contact details, abuse seat details, those kind of information. Resource consistencies, we look at overlaps. We even check with them on their RPKI-related information. And we look at, for example, root and RDNS consistencies. So we really help them. We take our LARs by the hand, checking all the information which is relevant to them and which is relevant to us. It's a two-way street. We give them a call, and we get really, really good results. So currently we are at the pace of 200 per month, and we are increasing that steadily. And the idea is to do 3,000 to 4,000 a year, as we have 12,000 members almost. And that ensures the quality of the registry and also enhances the relationship between our members and ourselves. So we take this very serious, and our membership is supporting us in doing this exercise.
Okay, I just need to know one thing. Like, you started this procedure, or you've taken the steps after some policy, or it was an internal decision?
No, we don't take internal decisions just like that. So there was no policy needed for this. It was a procedure which we started to discuss mid-2013. We used to have a procedure which was called an audit. It was very time-consuming for the LERs. It was very invasive to them, and they didn't get too much value out of it. So that's where we said, okay, that would not be the right track to move on. So how can we change the procedure in such a way that there's more value to our members and more value to the registry quality? So that's when we started to discuss it. It took about a year to come up with this process and procedure. We discussed it with our membership, and they agreed to it as such. So it's not policy-based, but it's a procedure which we have been doing. And we have a services working group in the RIPE region which discusses those kind of matters, and where we can get feedback from our membership on it.
Okay, thanks. Izumi?
Izumi, one second. Can somebody from ADIN can explain background or current NLPM? If my memory is correct, I think that it was some kind of compromise, right?
Hi, everybody. My name's Einar Bolin. I'm the policy analyst at ARIN. And Aftab, I think you accurately described what we do. We call it POC validation. We send about 20,000 emails every month. Unlike the RIPE NCC, we're required to email every POC in our database. So every point of contact. It's not just members. We have ISPs that create records for their customers. So we actually email them as well. And folks have 60 days to respond by clicking that their email is correct. If they don't do that, then we mark the point of contact as invalid. We can also do more research and try to reach folks in other ways. We can try to call them, things like that. But there really isn't anything that happens other than the records being marked invalid. Maybe that's the shame of having your record marked invalid gets people to click, but we don't have a very good response, to be honest. So.
Thank you. Then Izumi?
Izumi from JPNIC. Very interesting to hear other RIR's cases, and seems like there are things that we may be able to consider and take in our region. And we also had this kind of discussions within Japan. And from the perspective of the ISPs, at least within Japan, they actually find it hard to handle abuse reports that has, or things that as people communicate based on who is information, because a lot of spam, and so it's actually causing them a lot of extra work, and it's sort of discouraging them to register the accurate information, or register somebody who is really, really responsible, because it really consumes a lot of time. And one of the things that was suggested informally was that maybe in addition to WHOIS, have some kind of shared contact between, for example, LIRs, and for them to be able to immediately exchange information in case of abuse, but it's not going to be made available to public. So maybe people will be reporting based on WHOIS information that can still continue, but in cases where communication between LIRs would be effective and needed, they can also use this kind of database between themselves. Would like to hear what others think about this kind of idea.
Okay, thank you.
Ajay from IRIN. So as a procedure, we take few documents. We say know your customer document list. So based on document verification, we provide resource to them, and we are also discussing internally that for the mobile number verification, through our application website. So whenever they apply, we send one code so that once that code update in our website, we authenticate that number is correct, so that in future we can communicate correctly. That is our procedure. Thank you.
Okay, Paul.
Hi, Paul from APRICOT. I wanted to add some questions and some issues here which are not going to simplify what we're talking about. And I don't have the answers, and I think these are important things that we as a community might need to actually do some work on, and that's internationalisation, actually. Since the introduction of the IDN GTLDs, there's a lot of discussion now about what's called universal acceptance of IDNs, which is the general challenge of making sure that IDNs can be used in browsers and email clients and databases which store domain names. And then associated with that is also IEA, internationalised email addresses. So the first part, the question of internationalising the first part. Now our WHOIS database only is populated with Latin characters at the moment. Some NIRs and other registries have got internationalised content in WHOIS databases, and although at the moment APNIC is not carrying that, I think we can. I think we can more or less easily implement internationalised content. That probably makes the challenge of WHOIS accuracy more difficult, more diverse and more difficult. There's a question I think also as to whether WHOIS might need to be not only internationalised but multilingual, so that you may actually want to store multiple versions of things like contact details in more than one character set. And all of these make the accuracy issue more difficult. So I thought I'd raise that because we're starting to get queries about this sort of universal acceptance and so on at APNIC, and not yet quite sure how and when to implement. And I think in this community, which is such a multilingual community, these answers really need to come from the group in some way. I don't know if it might be a working group or a BOF or something at some point that could start to identify the issues that we have to deal with. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. I just need to make a couple of comments, like the way Paul suggested, rather than solving the issue, we are making it more complicated in coming years. So I'm not sure what is the right platform to discuss it, because we cannot do it in policy SIG, we cannot do it in NIR SIG. So I would like to ask policy SIG chair to suggest what should be the right platform to discuss all this issue, because network abuse BOF is there for 3 years. We are not progressing because of this roadblock. We cannot move further without it. So I would like to know how we can take a step further.
Yeah. We used to have database SIG, but it's gone a couple of years ago. And actually, in my understanding, WHOIS database is have quite strong relationship with address policy, number resource policy. So I think we can discuss in here. Of course, we need to focus on policy side, but I think your intention is implementing something to policy, right? To enforce.
The idea is to first streamline the problem statement, then find a solution, because the problem is quite scattered. We have so many questions to answer right now. We don't have all the answers. Try to address one answer through this policy suggested already working in Aaron region. As he suggested, that it is not a very good process. It is not getting the desired results. So still, I think this is pretty early to suggest a policy. Jessica, please.
Jessica from Cynic. As you supposed, I think ensuring the validation of WHOIS database is very important. So we have to carry out some ways to improve the accuracy of it. Besides it, I think it's it's the reality. I saw what I said is the situation in China, at least. It's the reality that the operators don't have a lot of time or the energy to handle a lot of spam or abuse reports. So I agree with Izumi's suggestion that let's share some contests of the network operators among different economics. In addition, I talked to some operators in China, and the idea I like to bring up is is it possible we create a software or system or program that can automatically handle with reported abuse. So because there will take too much resources and time to handle it by manual power.
Well, there are some commercial options available for handling those requests. Yeah. But I'm not sure at what scale, but yeah, they are available.
It's just an idea. We don't have I don't know if we have such commercial tools for that now. But the idea really comes from the realistic problem. It is very hard for them to handle such number of abuse reports by manual power. Yeah, so maybe we have to find some way to handle it automatically.
Definitely. Yes, last
Thank
comment
you.
from Dr. Ajay. Hi, morning everyone. Ajay Kumar from India. I just come here to kind of affirm my support to some of the views which have already been expressed. I agree totally with Aftab when he says, this is something we need to figure out who should address this. I mean, this whose problem has to be taken over by someone, whether it is the policy SIG or whether it is a NIR SIG or whether there needs to be a separate SIG for this. But this problem is extremely important, and I don't think we can, not attend to this. We see Erin has done something, they're not happy with it. We see RIPE has done something. I think in APRICOT also we need to address this. And I would also agree with Paul when he says this problem is going to get more complicated going forward with all the IDNs that are coming in, and there will be more of those. Because of the nature of the work, it will have to be something which is technology driven. It cannot be something which is manual beyond a point, because I think the scales are going to increase going forward even more. I mean, we're looking at IoT and we're looking at more IP addresses going to get allocated. Like my colleague from India mentioned, we are trying something where we do a KYC using a mobile phone. And mobile phone requires a KYC anyway, so as long as there is a mobile phone attached to a operator or to a network, we have some sort of identity. I'm not saying that's one solution, that's an experiment that we can look at, but we really need to have some kind of a technology-driven solution which can be automated to a large extent. But what the solution is a very big question, and I compliment Aftab for raising this. I think what I would like to say is we should create a framework under which this problem can be discussed at depth. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for your comment. And regarding the after question, I think nobody is saying it's not a problem. And I think everybody agree it is a problem, and we should find some solution for that, right? And also, originally, Policy SIG focused on the discussion about requirement or criteria for assignment or allocation. But since V4 is already running out, and we still have huge space for V6, so right now we don't really have not so many discussion about allocation or assignment criteria. So I think it is good time to discuss these kind of things. So let's start this kind of discussion in policy SIG, then if we will find it's not so appropriate in discussion here, let's make another SIG or another block. But I think it is acceptable to discuss this topic or the point which Paul Wilson raised about internationalized domain. I think we can start discussion. We will. I think it is acceptable to have discussion these kind of things in next couple of meetings. Is it okay?
Thanks, Masato, for the suggestion. If you are willing to open the Pandora box in the policy 6, I am happy to do that. Thank you so much.
Yeah. But anyway, thank you very much for asking. And it is 10:30, so even though we have one more item in this session, I'd like to move the Prop 115 to the beginning of next session and take a coffee or tea break right from here, right now, from now to 11 a.m. Then, since we have 3 proposals in second session, I would like to start just from 11 a.m. So please come back before that.